Welcome to Boring Money, Rich Life. I'm your host, Joy Hicks, and today we're going to talk about different ways to analyze stocks. So, there's typically two different approaches to kind of like analyzing what you should invest in. Now, to start, I am not a financial advisor, so I'm not going to tell you what to invest in specifically, but we're just kind of talking about like things that I've learned and how most people kind of approach stocks. So sometimes people will take a very like passive approach to investing in stock, and that could be them like investing in a different fund, and that fund then invests in these specific companies, and you're just kind of buying more and more shares of that fund. And then there's also a active approach. And in the active approach, that's where you yourself are kind of like analyzing individual stocks. And now with the funds, that can kind of be like a more like slow growth type of approach. So kind of like the steady kind of growth. And then a lot of times people will want to be a more active investor because they want that risk because with more risk comes more reward sometimes. So that's kind of why people will kind of say, okay, I want to be more of like a passive investor. I don't necessarily want to evaluate different stocks all the time. And then some people will be more of an active investor. Now, if you are an active investor, there are still within that two different approaches as well, because there is fundamental analysis and then there's more like technical analysis. Now, fundamental analysis is kind of more known for like long-term investors who are not necessarily looking to find like the most flashy stock. They're not necessarily looking for the most like high growth stock. They are kind of looking for those things that are kind of more like blue chip, always kind of performing well, have been proven, those types of companies. And when people are doing fundamental analysis, they are kind of looking at like the overall health of the company. So with fundamental analysis, you might be looking for things like profitability and debt. You might be looking at like leadership, like who is the CEO? How do they run the company? What's the vision for the company? You might be looking at like their offering and maybe even like their competitive advantage. And so Warren Buffett, he's been very well known for his approach to fundamental analysis because he's definitely somebody who's looking at all of those different aspects of the company. So not just how much their stock price is, but like what is the actual health of this company. And so in the past, he's often talked about what is their like economic moat. And if you think about a moat, it's like this little ditch filled with water and it kind of like separates people from like a home or something like that. And so he wants to know, what does this company have over the others? And that could be many different things, like maybe they're really good at like their product and maybe they're way ahead in their technology or something like that, and their competitors aren't really close enough, or they don't necessarily have like the customer loyalty or different things like that. So that tends to be what he's looking for. So definitely like the overall health of the company, and then also what sets them apart, like what is their advantage. So that tends to be more fundamental analysis. And then you do have more like short-term investors who may also be doing like trading as well. And they're kind of looking at like technical analysis. So with technical analysis, you're looking at the stock price, and then you're also looking at like the different volume. So that way you can kind of like pick out different trading patterns. And you can also kind of like hope to kind of predict the different like price movements. And so, again, that does tend to be for people who are often like trading different stocks, or they're looking to kind of just hold their stock for a more shorter period of time. And so, again, it's kind of like more risk, more reward, because if you do hit the right one, you do have the opportunity to kind of like make growth a lot faster than you would with a more like slow growth type of company. So that's kind of the difference. They're definitely looking at like the movements of the stock, where it's going, what might be affecting it. And when it comes to different stock prices having movement, whether that's going up or going down, that does have a lot to do with what's going on in the world. So definitely look at what's happening in your country and then also with like a global lens because current events definitely have an impact on whether stocks are going to be up or whether stocks are going to be down because of course as people are feeling more confident, they tend to spend more. And then as people are feeling more worried, they might start selling off, they might start getting nervous, they might start buying different assets and things like that. So definitely current events impact or, move the stocks as well. So both long-term and short-term investors are going to be looking at the news for sure, just to kind of keep an eye on like what's going on in the world. So not necessarily just like financial news, but also, again, like current events. And some things are more predictable. So, like elections tend to have a big impact on different stocks. And then some things can be, less predictable. So, maybe like a natural disaster or even like global pandemics and things like that definitely have an impact on stocks as well because they are kind of moved by what's happening in the world. So, if you're not watching the news and you are wanting to be more of like an active investor, that's definitely a good way to start because you do want to know like what's happening in the world for sure. And then with fundamental analysis, again, the one that's kind of like looking at the overall health of a company. So, some things to kind of like watch for in that aspect is the company that you're interested in, are they having any big changes? So, did they recently get a new CEO? Are they going through a merger? Are they, offering new products and doing like a different product launch? So, different things like that definitely have an impact on whether stocks are going to be up or whether they're going to be down. And then also kind of watching like economic reports as well. So definitely want to know like how the economy is doing. So things like the GDP and like the housing market, even like unemployment, which is like a very big concern right now because unemployment is definitely kind of on the rise right now. Those things will also have an effect on the stock market as well because again, if there's a concern with like the economy and like the health of the economy, it's definitely going to have an impact on how stocks perform, whether that's up or whether that's down. So, kind of getting more comfortable in those aspects can help you whether you are a more short-term investor or whether you're a more long-term investor. It'll kind of give you an idea of what you can kind of look out for. I will say, like me personally, I have definitely started watching the news more. So, like, even when I'm in the gym, I'll turn on the news just to kind of see, like, what's going on. Like, what are the recent headlines? What's happening in the world? Because it definitely does have an impact on stocks for sure. And it has an impact on, like, the global economy as well. And that was something that I never really used to do. Like, I remember. I was younger and my granddad, he was asking me like, "Do you watch the news?" And I was like, "No, I don't watch the news. Like it's boring." And he was so like offended that I don't watch or at the time that I didn't watch the news. And he was like, "Well, how do you know what's going on in the world?" Mind you, we're a very social media age. So like we definitely can still be informed by looking on social media, but there's still a lot of things, on social media that are like kind of clickbait driven. So watching the news, which can also be kind of biased too, but it's still helpful just to understand like what the large headlines are. But yeah, he was very offended at that time. And so now I am very big on watching the news or at least like the major headlines. If I don't watch the news, I'll also like look online and sometimes that tends to be easier because you can just read through it, read the articles, and kind of like get through it a lot faster. But it does help to definitely know like what is going on in the world. So, as always, what is one boring thing that you can do today to start fueling your rich life? Again, I'm your host, Joy Hicks. Thank you for watching and be sure to like and subscribe.